Hey everybody, today is Monday, June 5th, 2023. Coming up on the show today, from Ted Lasso, editor Melissa McCoy.
As they say in the finale, it's not about me, it never was. And that's kind of, I think, the ethos of the show is like, we turned it into something bigger than Ted Lasso, and that's kind of amazing and special.
And editor A.J. Catoline.
I just learned so much. I think I've grown as an editor. And Jason said that. Ted Lasso is not like Vegas. It's like what happens here, don't keep it here. Like take it with you to your next project.
Yes, all that and a lot more on this edition of The Rough Cut. Okay, game on, my friends. Time for us to take the pitch with a couple of all-star editors. Two very talented teammates from the cutting rooms of Ted Lasso. And of course, that's Melissa McCoy and A.J. Catoline. For those of you with long memories, they were on the podcast back in 2020 to discuss the breakout season of their show and the much-needed distraction it provided to a world turned upside down. Everything's fine now, of course. Well, now in 2023, it would appear that the adventures of Ted Lasso have come to an end with Season 3. So it would seem to be a great idea to reconvene with Mel and AJ and talk about how they brought the series to a close, as well as their reflections on how the show impacted their lives. For those of you somehow not familiar with the show or its uber-positive protagonist, here are the boilerplate details. Ted Lasso is an Apple TV Plus series developed by Jason Sudeikis, Bill Lawrence, Joe Kelly, and Brendan Hunt. And Jason plays Ted Lasso and Brendan plays Coach Beard. Ted Lasso is based on a character of the same name that Sudeikis first portrayed in a series of promos for NBC Sports coverage of the English Premier League, or English Premier League if you want to be fancy. The premise is that American college football coach Ted Lasso is recruited to coach an English Premier League team, AFC Richmond, despite having no experience in English football. So it's a learn-on-the-job kind of thing. Now, before we learn all about the job Mel and AJ did on Season 3, let's call a quick TV timeout for our sponsor, Extreme Music. Since 1997, they have been providing filmmakers and other artists like you with the best in production audio. Music created by multi-award-winning musicians and composers. Great music from names you know, and a few you might not. But they are all super talented in the art of music making. And if you want to meet these musical geniuses, well, all you got to do is just go to extrememusic.com, sign up for a free account. Hey, what's better than free? And then start your search for any, and I mean any kind of music you need. You can get your tracks on all kinds of links, right down to the stems, which means you can do things like go with the vocals or no vocals, strings, no strings. You get the idea. It's fun, it's easy, and you can do all the licensing right there online, or they can personally lend a hand from one of their many, many worldwide offices. There is always new music being added to their super incredible catalog. So if you want to make your next movie or TV show sound super incredible, make sure you partner up with the fine folks who help to bring you this podcast, Extreme Music. Okay then, I think I just heard Roy Kent say whistle, which means it is time to meet, once again, Ted Lasso editors A.J. Catoline and Melissa, don't call me Roy, McCoy. For posterity's sake, go for it.
It's always great when the last one comes out and we're like, we made it through the season without any leaks.
Shockingly enough, the last interview we did was November 2020 for season 1. And a lot has transpired since then. It has only been 3 seasons, yet it feels like the show has been around a lot longer, which is good. I'm sure it feels that way to you both as well. I know we're going to probably touch on this at the end, but I would just love to know from the very beginning, how does it feel to you now that this journey is over?
I think we're still in a bit of a processing phase. Like we're still just reviewing everything as of a couple of weeks ago, really, like VFX and everything. We've been living with this for so long. And even in the off period of just the excitement from fans and lovely people in the press want to talk to us. I feel like we've just been immersed in this world for so long that I don't think we've fully processed it. I think AJ and I talk about like at some point we're going to have to confront this as the end. I think we're delaying it. But yeah, it's seeped into our hearts and souls, and it's surreal to think about not doing it again. But I don't know. I think like everybody, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, my last day on Ted Lasso was actually Friday, believe it or not. So today's my first Monday not being involved in the show. I mean, this year was a bit crazy because we just delivered episode 11 on Friday. It airs on Tuesday. And so it's still very fresh. It hasn't landed on me yet that it's gone. I made a lot of great friends on this show. Mel feels like family to me and our assistant editors. And so I think it's probably going to hit us more in 8 months' time because that would have been about the logical time, or a year when we would have come back for a season 4 if there were one. Hopefully, maybe in a year from now, oh wow, I'm not going back to this. So, but yeah, I agreed with Mel. I've dreamed about the show, thought about it 24/7 when I'm awake. So yeah, it's going to be a challenge to decouple it from my soul and psyche. I'll have to get back to you on the answer to that.
That's okay. I'll always be here. I'm not going anywhere. It's interesting you brought up the whole, I think about this 24/7. Every editor aspires to have a show or a film that's a big hit. But with that success comes a lot of work, not to mention a lot of scrutiny from the fans. But let's focus on the work part. Is there a normal schedule for this show? And whether or not there is, does it get more arduous as the season goes on? What is a day in the life like for the editors of Ted Lasso?
When everybody's off in London, it's pretty good. Like we're just living. It's a special time when it's just us. I think we call ourselves the OG crew, the 4 of us that kind of came in season 1, and we've since grown into a bigger family. But it feels very like nesting, like we nest with the dailies and we talk about. It's just the 4 of us, and we talk with our producing director, Jason, every once in a while. But it's mostly us getting through the dailies, and those days are we can keep it a little bit more manageable because you have your time. And then once everybody comes back from London, it's a little more crazy of like Brendan's back and Joe are creators with Jason and all of us just working round the clock, all the little nuggets that we have to land in episode 8 that we set up in season 2 and all those things. Like we have all those discussions and it just becomes a little bit more intense. So yeah, more intense as the season goes on, and we really kind of start zeroing in on the episodes and what we need to start pushing forward. Like our football sequences are really intense. Sometimes our players are playing without a ball. So we CG in the ball a lot of the times, and the stadiums, of course, are all built. So we really have to like finalize that so we can get going on the VFX. And so then there starts to just be the immense workload of the visual effects, which you wouldn't kind of think for Ted Lasso, but it's a big VFX show.
I don't think there ever was, since the first day of shooting, it was a marathon. This year was, as you can tell from the shows, half-hour comedy, but the episodes have grown in length, 50, almost an hour. Episode 11 is an hour and 9 minutes. So that's, these are intense episodes. And on top of that, the details are more intense. And so it's a whole process of working with sound and working with online and visual effects just to make sure that all the notes and ideas that we were working on with Jason in the room get communicated to actually, appear in the final picture. So yeah, it's been nonstop even since last week. We were rushing to get the last episode out. So I don't know, a typical schedule, it changes. And of course it varied when Jason came back into the picture, because he was ping-ponging between me and Mel. We had bays down the hall, which was great. And so he could kind of go back and forth. But Jason works very narratively. So he mostly would do the odd episode and then the even episode. But there'd be times he'd, have an idea and come running into the other room. So yeah, it got a bit more intense once he got involved, for sure.
So pretty much 9 to 5, weekends off kind of thing. That's good.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a hard thing for editors in the pandemic because we're all at home. And it becomes very difficult to maintain, you're supposed to just do a 10 or 12-hour day, but yet you find it's 11 o'clock at night and you're kind of like inspired to do something. So it's like you got to try to maintain those boundaries of work and life.
Yeah, it's like you love it and you hate it. You're like, it's so great that if in the moment that I think about something, I can go and try it, but also then that you can go and try it.
Right. Well, AJ, you brought up the run length of the episodes. First season episodes averaged around 31 minutes, with the finale being 33. Mm-hmm. And I think the shortest was like 29. Mm-hmm. Second season crept up to the average being around 42 minutes with a 49-minute finale. Here we are, third season, and they average closer to 55 minutes with the finale being around an hour 15, I think. Mm-hmm. How does that impact you as editors? Does the run length of an episode really change the amount of work you're doing? How does that work?
I think it's kind of the same amount that we cut. And Jason was really intentional about this. I think the longer episodes, he was like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we did talk about that. Season 1 did this and season 2 did this. And now naturally it feels like season 3 should do this, which is we fell in love with these characters and then they became like family. And then, you just fall in love with their performances and want to live with them a little bit. And that's been the best part. It's just that you finding that balance of like how long to let things play. And if you have that ability and people let you, then it's kind of a special place to be. I had somebody reach out to me and was like, I really love that you let things breathe a little bit. And I get to like sit in that, because I think so much of this day and age, it's like you don't get to do that anymore. You're just racing. Everybody's racing to get through the next material and this and this and this. And it's, I don't know, it was kind of nice, but you don't want to ever, overstay. So it's a fine line of finding that balance. But no, I don't know if it felt harder. All the seasons have felt pretty similar, but we did at the end be like, wow, this was a lot. This was a lot of material we got through this season with the two of us. But we have wonderful assistants, Francesca and Alex, that bumped up, co-edited with us and additional edited on some, and really stepped up. And we brought in more assistants and visual effects team. And we brought in more hands to help us through.
Well, with a hit show like this, there's always so much interest in how it's going to play out. Everyone wants to know. Everyone has their theories. Going into the season, do the showrunners share with you the arc for the entire season, or are you learning as you go?
Yes, learning as we go.
Really?
Absolutely. No,
Sometimes.
Well, yes, there are some things that Jason did share with us, but I will say, and the cast has said this too, going back to season 1, that they only release like scripts so far in advance. So, and it got better with season 3, by the way. We got a little bit more, but I think, Mel, we might've been through like episodes 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 before we even got the finale script, last 2 scripts. So we didn't exactly know how it was going to end. And that was the case more in season 1 and 2. And I give this example. It's a simple one, but Nate, for example, I didn't know that he was going to betray Ted at the end of season 2 and reveal that Ted had a panic attack to Trent Krim. So that was an example of like, once I read that, I was like, oh my God, fortunately we had all the episodes unlocked. We say fortunately, the producers would go nuts about that. I was able to go backwards into episode 8 where Ted first reveals that he had a panic attack. I had to change the cutting pattern in there to make sure Nate has an extra moment to clock that. And there's a bunch of examples of that this season. Like we have some new characters, as you know, like the character of Kenneth, the psychedelic toad venom bus driver. We were like, what is this character? And then he plays some more interesting parts later. Most recently in episode 10, where he's wearing the same kind of similar tie-dye shirt to what Roy Kent's wearing. So those were like little moments like you had to go back and be like, okay, so this character does mean something. So we need to give him his moment earlier. But no, look, Jason does share with us details that are key. He's done that. He's shared like different ones with Mel and different ones with me. I knew in season 1 that Ted's dad committed suicide. And so that made, I paid attention to all the times in season 2 where the show referenced a father-son relationship. And that continues to happen this season. So like he will give us little details, but the show was, I think, very much in his head and he was writing it. So we were discovering it as it went.
Well, I mean, that's exactly why I asked that question, AJ, because you would think if you don't know, as you just illustrated, once you find out, you're like, well, wait a minute, this totally changes how I want to treat that scene in a previous episode. So would you rather know at the beginning of the season how things are going to play out? Or do you look at it like, no, the first pass should be me as an audience member learning this for the first time. And if things do change down the road, it's okay that I go back.
Yes. I mean, I think being fresh with the material, especially in season 1, because, again, we were just approaching these characters like, well, what makes me laugh? What is interesting? And sometimes Jason would really respond to that. And then other times he would, send me a text and be like, no, with this, I saw this cut and I would like you to avoid this type of, stressing this line too much or, so yeah, definitely it provided a bit of mystery, and then it just got easier as the seasons went on because we started to know what the gists and the details are of the characters. But I was surprised to read that Roy and Keeley break up in the very first episode of this season. We have a clue of that last year, but that was not revealed to me, and we didn't know that in season 2.
Yeah, I was going to say it's fun. It was fun sometimes, like watching the dailies, and the actors are so good, and they give such wonderful. They're always on. They're always, as Bill likes to say, they're always working, even when they're not on, like, it's not their close up. So they're always, or when they're speaking, they're listening and they're reacting. And so you'd watch something and you'd be like, oh, that's an interesting reaction on that line. And it's like, I wonder if that means something more. So that was always like, if you use that, and then when Jason comes in the room, you're like, oh, and kind of ask him about it. He'd give you the backstory of what this meant. And then you can kind of go deeper in that way. So that was always nice. Like in season 1, I didn't know that Keely and Rebecca were going to end up becoming friends, but there was a scene in episode, I think 3, where Keely comes in and just puts her feet up and sits in the room. And Hannah was giving such wonderful kind of like, she's still tight, but she was letting it down a little bit, just letting her guard down a little bit. And these reactions, like almost being delighted, but doesn't want to be delighted. And that was before I knew Sassy and that whole thing. And it was just so wonderful that that's where that ended up going, because that's what I was getting in that scene from their performances. So then I felt like, oh, I discovered that, but it's not, no, they probably were discovering that on set. And then I picked it up through their performances, and that's where it ended up going. But it almost made it feel like you were creating that feel. And maybe they were like building on that, but I think it was all in Jason's head and planned. But he makes you feel like you're, bigger than you are sometimes, which is the nice thing about working with him.
Mm-hmm. Colin being gay, that, we had a hint of that in season 2, but then when I read the script to 3 and he kisses his boyfriend, I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is so great. I'm loving that this character is having his whole new arc. So that was just a surprise too. We had a hint of it, but Jason didn't say it was going to happen.
My impression of this 3rd season is that there's more storylines that you two are having to balance. There's more emphasis on people other than Ted. Was that something that you did discuss with Bill and Jason, or it just sort of played out that way? What is your take on that notion that this season does have more to do with characters other than Ted? And is it a challenge for you to balance those multiple storylines?
It always feels like, maybe for me, it just feels like Ted's always there because he built all these relationships. And so I always feel Ted. So yeah, that was a little bit, I guess, yeah, if you're counting up screen time, maybe, you don't see Ted as much, but I think he's in every inch of the show. So yeah, I just think that was like the natural story arc of the season. And, as they say in the finale, it's not about me. It never was. And that's kind of, I think, the ethos of the show is like, we turned it into something bigger than Ted Lasso. And that's kind of amazing and special and wild. And I think that's Jason just being fearless.
Yeah, he said that a lot in editing. My instinct, I love Jason and his performance, and his reactions are so fun. So at one time he just said, listen, the show's called Ted Lasso, but you don't always have to cut to Ted. And so he's very generous to share the screen with the other characters. And I think, yeah, these characters have grown so much. You can't, I read what the fans are saying, and so many of them love it, but many of them are like, we just want it to be about the core team. And I think that's why they love the Amsterdam episode so much, because it was our people. But at the same time, these characters, first of all, amazing cast, but also the characters have grown. So you have to do a story to follow where Keely goes and trying to start her new company and connect, and find new love. And so these characters are deep, and it wouldn't make sense if they didn't grow. But agreed with what Mel said. It is Ted has planted all this vibe in AFC Richmond. And I love the line when Trent Krim comes in episode 7. He's like, you haven't changed tactics in a week. You've been doing this over the last 3 seasons by planting moments that all lead to total football, and it's going to work. And that's such a great line, because to me, that's more than just Trent saying that to Ted. That's Trent speaking for the entire, almost the show, to the whole audience. Like, we've been setting this up the whole way. And so Jason's very generous to give everyone a storyline.
Season 1, the relentless optimism of Ted Lasso is what resonated with everyone, especially considering what the world was like at the time. So you couldn't be too sentimental. You couldn't be too optimistic in season 1. It does feel like as the show has progressed, it does get a little more complicated, a little deeper. Any discussions along those lines heading into season 3?
Yeah, it's always about going back to the character, and we talk about what happened in season 1 and, how that might have shaped how this plays out. And, the one I'm thinking about is Nate's conversation with his dad. And that was a big conversation between me and Matt Lipsey, who directed it. And I know he talked to Jason, and we all had this conversation about, well, if you had a complicated relationship with your father, what would your reaction be? Would you be to cry or this or that? And we really went into the psyche of like what that experience would be for yourself. And then we talked about what Nate's journey has been and what that conversation might mean to him, because I had takes of him like crying back with his dad, but I also had like, I think there was one take where he was more reserved. And that's kind of where we ended up going. Like the dad breaks down and that shocks you more, sort of thing. So we did like those micro talks, but overall tone, no, it's always character based with us and like, storylines and what that means going forward. I mean, AJ, do you have any?
I mean, I wish all editors wish that they could sit in a tone meeting. And we were sometimes invited to these production Zooms, but unfortunately, they would be at like the equivalent of 5 a.m. for us, how they were holding them. So I didn't go to them all. And we would get our communication mostly with Jason. He trusted us enough to kind of figure it out. He would send us texts and emails, while he was in London. And then the rest we would hear from our directors. Yeah, Matt Lipsey, so enjoyed editing with him. He's such a comedic, great stylist and genius as a director. So he would download to me, like, this is the conversation I had with Jason about this moment. And so that would help. And that's how we would get that communication. But sometimes, though, it's interesting because you hear that from the director, like, no, on set, they said they wanted it shot like this. And so this is why we have to do it this way. And we would cut it that way, but then we would try a different way. Like I have a couple other shots or performances that I want to try. And Jason would see that and he's like, oh, that's great. Sometimes he would disagree and be like, no, we need it this way. But probably more times than not, he would say, that is not the way that I thought of it, but that is a very interesting approach to cutting this scene. And so he loves when, the best idea wins with him. So when he sees something that we're doing, he will absolutely say that is, you nailed that edit. Let's not change that. And that's a great feeling. But I think it's just Mel and I knowing the show and knowing the characters and being really passionate about it.
Well, as editors, you're always getting a note from somewhere. Director, producer, the studio, your parents, everybody has an opinion on what you should do.
Twitter,
yeah. Well, we could talk about that too.
Yeah.
So you're trying to take care of all these notes, and that's just what an editor does. There are times when you work on a show where the director is also the writer. The director might also be an actor in the show. Here, on multiple points, you have actors that are writers that actually are the ones crafting the show itself. What is it like getting notes from these guys? How might they be different than a note you would get from a director or writer that's not actually in the show?
I mean, I think sometimes they're more open-ended. Like you really kind of have to sometimes be like, wait, what's the note in here? It's like a feel, or they want it to be a this or that. And you're like, okay, is it a, because you could sometimes with those open-ended things, it's not like, oh, I think if we cut from here to here, then this will do this. It's not like those technical notes. It's more of like, this is what the vibe of the scene should be, or this is what the tone of the scene should be. So you're like, okay, so what in here is not providing that for them? So that's sometimes what I would notice. But for the most part, we do get a lot of notes, but a lot of times Jason is the filter. So he's got like a system with us where if, he kind of collates the notes for us. We definitely have all of them when we go to sit in with Jason. So we hear everybody's voices. And sometimes the writers were coming in this season. Sometimes the cast came in this season and we screened with them. But yeah, Jason's got an interesting thing where he's like, this is worth a try. It's like a check mark. And, like a circle is this and an X is don't. I don't agree with this note. And so we had like a tiered system, but I ended up always trying stuff and putting it in an alt bin. And I think by the time we got to this season, I think we all had a lot of trust in one another. So the notes were like, I know you probably have a reason for doing it this way, but have you tried this? And they were really like lovely in that way, which was nice.
Yeah, it's Jason. Well, first of all, he gave me a great quote this year, which I'll share with other editors, because he would get, as Mel said, he would get these notes, from other people, the studio or the network, or even his two writing partners, Joe and Brendan. And, when he didn't want to do them, he would want to find another solution. So he would say to me, it's not about doing the note, it's about making the note disappear. And I thought that was really interesting. Meaning that try to figure out why is the person writing this note and how can we make it disappear through another editorial solution, especially if we don't have what they're looking for. Like, don't you have a close up of the, no, we don't. So it's about, well, how else can we make that note disappear? And then the other thing he said about notes was he said, follow the timing and the choices of the actors, because he would spend a lot of time giving these notes to the actors. So when they were performing, he's like, that's the that's either the pacing we want at this moment or the feel. So what they're doing, just follow that instinct. So I think I just did that as, I went on to see how they performed it. And at least that's the first cut, to kind of be true to what they did, on the set. And then when we work with Jason, we'll figure out, what we can keep or how we can cut from here to there to save time but it always begins with just following what they do on the set and trusting what they give us.
Well, forgive me, but I have to ask, when you're getting these pearls of wisdom from Jason, does he ever slip into the Ted voice?
No. He does.
He's a different character.
Yeah, but he did this season start telling us more like where are the kernels of these things, because it's like they all come from somewhere, those little jokes and stuff. And there were a lot of times would be like, oh, Snoop Dogg said this line to me at SNL when I was first starting writing, and things like as a true SNL fan, I delighted in this season. I got a lot of them, and I sometimes come home and tell my husband, so I could be like, I don't want to forget this. Oh, what his nickname is for Kristen Wiig, and because he'll tell a story and stuff. So I got real fangirly about that.
Okay, you have to reveal that now, Mel. Here.
Yeah.
No. I want to keep the editorial safe space. But yeah, he doesn't slip into the Ted voice, but he does. He is very generous and shares a lot of inspirational stories, because he is a lot like Ted, but minus the voice a lot of the time.
Yeah. When I first met him on season 1, Bill Lawrence brought him into the bays, and he's like, this is Mel, this is AJ, this is where the snacks are, the restrooms are down the hall. And I was just so surprised, because I knew the Jason Sudeikis of SNL, and What Up With That, and doing the dance that he does, and he was just so much, more chill and very kind of introspective. And he loves to really dive in and think about things and have everything right. He's an avid card. He's a great dealer, and dealing with his cards. And Tim, that's a bit of a kind of, I think, of a stress reliever of how he processes everything. But yeah, it definitely, but he does do little things. He's an actor. So sometimes he acts out the notes in the edit bay, which I find interesting. And I think he'll get up off the couch. He's all right. So what I want to do here. So you're the camera. And so when I want to have him walk, and then we're going to have, Roy cross the room and then give a quick look and then come over and then, say the line. So he gets up and he'll act it out, and it takes time. And maybe that's why it took so long to edit the show, because you could give that. So I listened to all that and I say, so what you're really saying is you want me to use this shot here? He's like, yeah, that's it. But it took him 5 minutes to pantomime that out for me. But it's amazing. And in those moments, whoa, I'm doing a scene with Jason Sudeikis here in the room.
He also is great to have for ADR, temp ADR.
He turns that Ted voice on right away. Yeah.
It's amazing, because you don't realize, just to see the flip of the switch and the art of it all, and how easy he makes it look. It's really fun. And then he gets into that voice, and you're like, oh yeah, that's Ted Lasso.
Who does Roy Kent's temp ADR?
Oh.
Well, we had different people do different things.
Yeah.
Frankie, Mel's assistant, would be Rebecca a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Alex was Arlo. Robbie, our post supervisor, was Chris. I would do Ted a lot sometimes. We had different voices. We'd all do it. We needed people.
I'm not going to ask you, but I want to ask you to do Ted. But that's okay. Well, I'll ask you another question, AJ, so you don't have to do that.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, he did the whole episode 1, the back and forth with Sharon. That was AJ and Francesca for the longest time. It's really funny
that way, because everybody thought it was great temp ADR.
Yeah,
and we have got a note from the studio wow, you guys really sell the temp voiceover. I mean, sure.
I hear they're considering spinoffs, so maybe you and her can have your own show. Yeah. That would be wonderful. But let's stay focused on this show for the moment. Starting off a new season. First episode, always a big challenge. AJ, you had to take that on. It's always okay, how do I get this thing moving quickly so that the audience is back up to speed, or up to speed if they're somehow new to Ted Lasso? You do this with a montage, with a voiceover, with a call with Dr. Sharon. She asks Ted how he's feeling about the upcoming season, so you get to digest it that way. And so by the time we're all the way through the credits, we know this stuff. We know that Richmond has been picked last and West Ham is picked first.
That cold open was interesting, because it was a long cold open. And it also wasn't necessarily going for comedy, but more for feeling. It begins on that close shot of Ted, and that's language to our fans. They should know what that means, because season 1 begins in the close of Rebecca, ends in the close of Rebecca. Season 2 is the close of Nate, ends on the close of Nate. So I think our fans know what it means when season 3 opens with the close shot of Ted. That first scene was, found that interesting. That's where they wanted to begin, because that's a scene with Ted saying goodbye to his son. So there's really not much comedy in that scene. There's a couple jokes where he interacts with the flight attendant, but it's very heavy and the music is heavy. And we were debating about which songs to use. And it's really wonderful when you have access to your composer, Tom Howe. And I texted him and said, I'm going to need a score to go here. And he gave me that score from the very beginning. And I kind of cut to that pacing. And it was just always so beautiful. And then when we now then cut to the montage of Ted getting ready and cleaning up the Legos and cleaning up after Henry and getting dressed for work and walking across the green and bumping into the locals. And that's Brendan Hunt's son, baby Sean, in the stroller. That's when the show starts to feel a bit more like a comedy. I'd say that to Mel, like we were watching, it's like both halves of that cold open. Then when he enters the house, I'm like, hey, now we're in our comedy mode. So it was just piecing the montage together and then knowing, I think the hardest part was just knowing we had to fit the lines of VO in between the sound ups where he just says hello to someone. And so it just became about it became a bit of a house of cards. Like if I move this, then that screws up the next three bits, But yeah, we switched this year. Mel and I switched. I was team odds this year and Mel did the even shows.
Unfortunately for Mel, she did episode 2, which is, I don't say unfortunately because it was a bad episode. I say unfortunately because of the question I'm about to ask.
Uh-oh.
The episode opens with the warning that this episode contains sequences of flashing lights or patterns.
Oh, did it?
Okay, well, there goes that question.
What was it in the show that was that?
Well, that would be Apple adding that probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I wondered is like, where in the process does something like that get introduced? Does the editor even know? And apparently no. I'll try and redeem this question somewhat. I think the reason for this is there's a club scene where Keeley is shooting a commercial. It takes place in a dance club. Mm-hmm. The first part of the question was going to be, what is the threshold that determines that warning? I guess we'll just leave that for another lifetime.
I would think Beard's Night Out would have been because that one did. I remember that one.
Beard After Hours, you would think would be totally that.
Yeah.
But in this scene, they're talking about, it doesn't look like it's a real busy club. And Shandy, who is directing the commercial, says, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just add strobe effects in post and we'll have people cross close to the camera. Essentially saying, don't worry, we'll fix it in post.
Exactly.
So, Melissa, along those lines, do you have any tricks that you often use on Ted Lasso to fix things that didn't happen there in production?
Oh, yeah. There's so many of those invisible things that sometimes I don't even think Jason knows about. Like, what was like episode 4 when, it was just like something small. Episode 4 when they find out that Keeley's video, or that's episode 8, when they find out it's Keeley's video that got leaked. I have a shot of Roy walking out the door, like leaving. And I like needed that shot. I found one where the camera was kind of panning, but there was a boom operator guy in there. And I was like, oh my gosh, we ended up just doing a split screen and we have a lovely VFX team. And he, made it look seamless. And it was just, oh yeah, it just stayed like they had planned for that and shot that. And we have so many of those kind of things that happen. A lot of split screens, a lot of time warps and fluid morphs. They plan things meticulously on set, but the episodes are so big and we're trying to tell such big stories that sometimes we do have to like incorporate that kind of trickery to solve problems. So a lot of a creative mind space has to go there sometimes of like, how can we make this moment? A lot of people talk about this, like our production designer and our hair and makeup team. It's like, Jason always comes in and lifts the bar. And so you're always trying to lift the bar. And how can I make this even better than it already is and lift my game and make something smoother, better, more invisible, snappier, funnier? This, like that's always in your brain. So whatever kind of magic you can have up your sleeves. And sometimes I worry we ask for the moon, and because we're Ted Lasso, people want to make it happen because everyone believes in the show so much. But that's a dangerous place to be sometimes, to be like, well, we can fix it. And, we could do this, we could do that. And then your list of things you're fixing is always growing sort of thing. But
yeah. We have a great visual effects editor who really helped out a lot this year. And we didn't have one of those season 1. And I don't know how we did it, but we definitely need as the VFX increase on the show. But I will say, Jason, Mel's talking about magic. That's his little shorthand to us. He calls it movie magic. He's like, what movie magic can we do here? And, what he means by that is how can we, pace this up or somehow join 2 takes or, So yes, all the Avid tools help, fluid morph and motion effect editor. And Jason loves the Avid. I will say, shout out to Avid here.
God bless that guy.
Yeah. Well, he uses little. He's a quick learner, so he learned quickly that the space bar is play stop. So that became a little joke with me. He'd be like, "Oh, hold on a second." He had to take a text in the middle of editing, so I'd stop the screening. He'd do his text, and he's like, "Okay, let's go space bar." And he would play, So he knew little things like that, and then he also loved the motion effect editor. I showed it to him because we were doing a couple things where they didn't have a couple shots that we needed. Specifically when Nate breaks up with Rupert and leaves the Bones and Honey Club. We were just trying to extend that moment a little bit more. And so I took a shot and kind of slowed it down and added fluid motion to it. And it looked beautiful. And we were debating about how it should slow because he's very specific about, where Nathan shifts his eyes and then looks. So he was getting really specific. So I said, look, here's the motion effect editor. And these are the different beats. And he was fascinated. And so he loves to geek out with us on the technology. Yeah.
Spacebar, and then that's it. You really don't need to know much more than spacebar if you want to be an editor.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to episode 3. There's a big montage in it. This one goes for 3 minutes.
Oh my God, yeah.
The Richmond on a roll montage where, Zava joins and takes the team to the top. That is that's a lot of stuff. And I am almost positive if you look at the script, it's just 2 lines of Zava takes the team to the top. Yeah. Go get him, AJ.
Yeah.
So tell me how you go about building something that extended, that long.
It was written, Bill Rubel wrote that one, and it was written out as a montage designed to move us through a lot of story. But I will say it took a long time to edit. I had many versions of it. I'd show them to Mel. And also we cross-board the shoot. So a lot of the things weren't coming in. So it's hard you had to wait till it was all shot before we put it all in. And one of the shots in there didn't get shot till literally the last week. But it took a long time with Jason about that. We have 2 big montages, I think, in the series this year where we did that. One is in 12. Where Jason just gets a bunch of cards and treats it like writing, and he puts the cards out on the table with each of the scenes, and he's moving them around. So in that sense, he's not following the script. He's changing the order of how things happen. The music took a long time. The writer suggested music. We tried that. It wasn't sure if that worked. Then we tried another piece. And it wasn't until, Jason came in one day, because he's very specific with music. And I remember I was in Mel's edit room, and he comes in with his phone, and he's like, I just heard this song. Listen to this. And he played Adriano Celentano's, I can't even say the name. It's a long, it's got, 15 characters. It's a gibberish song that was written back in the 70s. And he's like, let's try this for the montage. And he's like, how long is it? And he said, a 3-minute, 20-second song. He's like, well, that's going to be how long the montage is. So it's just about, finding places where those things go and to having it kind of flow. And we have a great music editor, Richard Brown, who helped to edit that song so that it could dip in the parts where we wanted it to dip and then come back up where we needed the energy. And the graphics we created in-house, and they stayed very much that way throughout the whole edit. But my favorite edit in that, we were trying to figure out what to play for the Zava doing the final bicycle kick. And I was talking to Brendan about it. Brendan's like, well, it should be something godlike. And we love musicals on the shows. There's a lot of references. So he's like, well, how about Jesus Christ Superstar? I'm like, oh my God, that is genius. So we put that in the Superstar song as Zava's doing that bicycle kick. And it blew my mind to find out that Rupert, played by Anthony Head, his brother is Murray Head, who's singing as Judas in that show. So that was just like one of those cosmic lasso coincidences.
One night in Bangkok, Murray Head?
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
And those are the type of things on this show. They're like, oh, you can't plan those coincidences.
Well, I'm going to jump out of order, actually, since we sort of did a deep dive on montage. I'm going to jump ahead to episode 10, the Nate violin montage, which
so beautiful.
Beautifully executed. I mean, you have Nate picking up his childhood violin and playing it in his room, which Nick Mohammed really played, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
Which is the foundation for the boardroom scene with Rebecca basically telling off the other club owners. Just so much going on in that piece. Tell me about putting that together.
Yeah, this show sometimes, gives you just the best where you're like, I could walk away from this and be very happy with my career. Like, I got to do something very special. And this was one of those scenes where the way Matt shot the violin was just one take. It was just, that's one close up. It was AB where I had a wide shot, but the cameraman that was doing the, around Nate was always in the shot. So I was like, well, okay, I have one take. I have one shot of this. And so I kind of treated it like I jam synced all my tracks with that. So wherever I had to slide things around, I could always match back in whatever piece of stem I was using, match back to what Nate was matched. So I matched all his stems, his, the daily thing. And so everything would always match wherever I was in the song. So if I slid things around, then I would be like, okay, well now if I want to go back to Nate at this point, because I changed here, I'm going a little bit later. What does that look like? And so it was really, that was kind of a fun puzzle of what that did, because the music was the backdrop. So like when I went to Nate, if I wanted to go at a certain moment, you were like, okay, but this is what he's doing in that moment. And so that became a little bit of a puzzle, but, the sneaking in the piano, after Rebecca makes the decision to admonish because at first it's just Nate and the violin. And then, we had the little boys and landing Keeley's text. So it's like, they're a bunch of little boys. And so when you cut there and then cut back to her face, cut back to the boys, we talked about how many times do we need to land that. And then, then we go back to the men looking around and being like, what's happening? We sneak in the piano. And then these great push-ins, equal size of Rebecca and Anthony. So then once she starts directing her whole conversation to him and telling the story, and it becomes a moment between the two of them, I really wanted to stay in those shots and matching the size. So sometimes I did some resizes, so their sizes matched when we were cutting back and forth between them, and those moments of connection. And then the extra layer of what's happening in the locker room or in the screening room as they're watching Jamie. And then bringing in that VO, because for the longest time, we didn't have what the announcers were saying from the game, because that was added a lot later. And Brendan finally did a great scratch track for me so I could land the timings, because for the longest time, it was all visual and it felt a little quiet. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I was a little nervous about it. But then once we got the VO in and could mess with where we're landing Rebecca's lines and trying to just hit those emotional moments of what she's saying, like, it's one of those games where it makes you feel shit one moment and you see Sam who's down about, the game. And then we bring in the announcer so you kind of know what you're watching. You're watching Jamie with the England game. And then he reveals that he's wearing Sam's number. We bring up the background dialogue of the announcers saying, explaining that. And then Rebecca, like it's Christmas morning the next, and you see the team and Sam's face light up. And so it was just a beautiful moment of performance, music, and if I haven't said it, performance of Hannah Waddingham. I just want to follow her around and craft her performance forever if I could. And Sam Richardson, who I actually knew before either of us were anybody. We worked together at Disney World randomly, and I was going to go off to film school, and he was so funny. I was like, and he was talking about going to Second City, and then we reunited back on this show, and he's a big part of that episode. And so yeah, we have pictures of ourselves in our 20s. So that's another Ted Lasso. The universe works in mysterious ways of reuniting an old friend who's also now a big time star. And we both kind of were, I want to do filmmaking, and we both are kids from Michigan and found our way back to the show. So anyways, yeah, a lot of special things in that episode, in that montage that I could probably just talk about forever, but people might be nodding off, but.
I just want to add that the violin, this is to answer your earlier question. I didn't know, or I don't think Mel knew, that Nate even knew how to play the violin. So that when we read that and those dailies came in, we tried to figure out a way to do a little setup with Nate earlier. And I went back to episode 1, and when Nate has his panic attack and he goes under the desk, he's panicking. And you hear in the score, we got a sound of someone learning the violin, which we thought would be Nate maybe in his youth. And then we do a flash cut to his father.
Maybe editing is more than just hitting the space bar. That's good stuff.
Yeah. This show is very intentional with, whether anybody picks up on it or not, but we try it with sound, and it gets very into the weeds sometimes, and it's fun for us, and hopefully people subconsciously pick it up. Maybe.
Well, something that isn't episode specific, or it's specific for multiple episodes, so this is for both of you, is the actual game sequences, the actual soccer or football sequences. When you have an episode that has a big match in it, and there's a few, there's the first West Ham versus Richmond, and then there's the big showdown stuff. When you have an episode that features something like that, Does that necessarily mean that this episode's going to take a little longer, or that you know that you're going to be on this game sequence for a while?
It definitely takes priority when we get football footage in. So they would do those shoots like throughout the season. And we knew, okay, well, they're going to do a football shoot next week. We just had to clear our decks because that footage kind of has priority because it has to go through a lot of people to help us. We have a sports director that takes a look, and then we show it to the director, and then we start getting things to visual effects early so they can start work on all those sequences because it's all green screen shot in the field, and there's leaves on the field that need to be removed, and it's a lot of work. So the big sequence in 11, the big match against Man City, and that's why the episode's called Mom City. But yeah, that is a massive one. There's so many sequences that had to be put together and just kind of letting it flow. And then I'd work with the sports director a lot, and he'd be like, well, from a football point of view, it would be like this. And I'm like, you're right, but the Ted Lasso is not about football necessarily. So we also have to cut it from a dramatic angle, kind of focusing on our characters and not always just kind of cutting it as though you would see a soccer match. So yeah, a lot of work, the football all around.
Yeah, it's one that you kind of go back to a lot, I think, too, as the pieces come in, because there'll be, you'll get the brass up in the stands, and then you'll get the coaches, and then you'll get the bar at different times, and you can, that allows you a little bit more freedom. So you kind of go back and you're like, oh, well, we could do this. And so it's a lot of revision, which is nice before you really get to the end process of it. You're revising, always kind of revising as new footage comes in, and you see kind of what can help you get out of a tough situation, right? Like, okay, we could go to the bar for a reaction shot here and then play this moment in the TV, and that might help, or those kind of creative decisions come later too sometimes. So
going to the bar often gets you out of a tough situation.
Exactly. When in doubt, cut to the bar.
You work with things like temp soccer footage, sort of almost like animatic soccer footage, just so you can get ahead of things?
Sometimes, yeah, we call those steelos. It's more for production to kind of see, like we need the shot to be like this, so they'll use those. But yeah, we were using in season 1 we had previs, and then we realized that it's just too complicated to do it that way.
But season 1 we would do YouTube videos, then they would make the previs based on that.
Correct.
On our YouTube, I'd pull in a bunch of shots of stock and YouTube and all this just to build okay, this person kicks here, and just title cards over everything.
Scoreboards, yeah. We'll steal establishers of stadiums, and then we'll go license the correct shot later. In episode 11, you'll hear a lot of chanting of the Man City soccer fans, doing their city. And that I had to, once it was all cut, and I was working with the sound team, I went in and layered all those things in places where you can hear it around the dialogue. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff we'll just steal and then go try to find to license it or do it in the loop group.
And two, I think more this season I felt was like the culture around each of the teams, because I'm thinking like in episode 2 when they go to Everton and their song is da-na-na-na-na-na-na, and it's like a whole thing. Anyways, I kind of was like, what's the vibe? So I went and watched a YouTube clip of the stands and what the music is, and then when Rebecca gets up to go confront Zava, like she's gonna, storm into the bathroom, wanted to make that kind of a big moment, and everybody in the stands kind of around the extras started to clap. So you're like, oh, the team's coming out of the thing, and we played the music of the team coming out, so that swelled up as she gets up to leave. So we were trying to build in like what the culture around these real teams were as much as we could, story-wise and stuff, and to try to weave it into the storylines. So that was another extra layer of the football that we try to pay attention to, because we're in FIFA. You can play FIFA 23. You can play as Richmond, which I have, and I scored as Colin Hughes. I was very excited about it. So yeah, we felt more in the world now. I think people accepted us more into the Premier League this year.
Well, we got approval from the Premier League to use all their logos and all the teams, and you'll see a lot of the coaches in the show. So yeah, so that definitely gave it authenticity. And our sound team, I want to give a shout out to them. They just do such a great job bringing the sound to life. When you hear the final mix, it's like another layer. Our recording editor, Ryan Kennedy, went over to London before the season and actually recorded a bunch of games. We also do a lot of stuff in with the extras. We had a bunch of extras, and they sang the West Ham Blowing Bubbles song So there's just a lot of great sound work to bring all that crowd to life, and they do a great job.
And we digitally added bubbles to West Ham.
Yes.
So anytime you see bubbles floating in the air, that's a visual. That's shout out to VFX.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now you're in FIFA.
Mhm.
You're able to license and use real teams and logos and all that stuff. You want it to be as accurate and as authentic as possible. AJ, I was talking to Melissa the other day, and I was like, "Hey, so what are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm trying to finish a big show, moron." No, she didn't. She
That
didn't
sounds
say
like
that.
me.
She would not say that. No, but she said I'm reviewing shots, and specifically, I think looking for, like, I think it was game clocks and things like that. You have so many graphics in the show
details.
supporting what's going
Oh my
on.
goodness.
Mhm.
Tell me about that aspect, that meta layer of like, well, I got to make sure the clocks are right. I got to make sure the scoreboard's right, and all that stuff.
We had to do a game clock pass on each episode, and that has a game. And Brendan would help us out with that for a while, but he would get busy doing other things. So, the principles of it, like every half, the first half goes to 45 minutes, and the clock in the stadium freezes, and then only on television do you see the extra time clicking. So, we have to logically think about what would happen when, and kind of game out the match. And we don't know where the scoreboards are until visual effects comes back with them. So I can't tell there's a scoreboard back there because it's all just green screen. And so then it comes back like, oh, there's a scoreboard there. So I need to figure out what is the clock there. And then they'd be rushing. So oftentimes they would just tempt the score in as 0-0. But it's like, but we just saw 2 goals, so it can't be 0-0. So it's a lot of notes back and forth of like, let's get the scores right. And that's always my fear when I'm looking at the show on the air. Score correct.
Yes, because they will. Our fans will freeze frame.
Oh God! On the text,
zoom in, and you're like, oh no!
A lot of text this year.
So yeah, we drove ourselves crazy, I think, a little bit, and like getting into the weeds of like, but a lot of intention. I think there was an article out about the background, like, because a lot of times if you cut to a text message, it's always like a new message and you don't have a text history with somebody. But we had our before the strike, obviously our writers wrote out the scripts for a lot of the back and forth, and I can't remember which publication did an article that appreciated the
great text history.
For the fans that paused and would look up and be like, oh, this was their exchange and how funny this is, and they appreciated those details. So hard work checked off. It's just when it can, when you go deep into the weeds like that, you're like, I think there's bigger picture things we could worry about. But so we were juggling the expectations of fans and all that this season for sure.
I want to follow up on the fan expectations thing in a second, but there's one more scene specifically I wanted to ask about, and that was the episode that takes place in Amsterdam where Ted goes on his Bad Batch drug-fueled trip and invents Total Football, or reinvents it. A really fascinating sequence that takes place in it's the Yankee Doodle Burger Barn, where he discovers the triangle offense. And there's some fantastic voiceover and animation that goes on there. And I'd love to know about that sequence.
Yeah, that was another one where pinch me. This is the coolest thing I'm ever going to get to work on. And God bless Jason Sudeikis for taking that leap creatively and where he gets his inspiration. So much fun. So there's this cartoon called Donald in Math Magic Land that's all about teaching maths to the youth. That's like a 60s. I think it's maybe 59 was the year it was made. And there's wonderful narration. And the man that did it did kind of all those Goofy videos and Donald Duck videos back in the day. And he's the voice in the Haunted Mansion that when you go through the Haunted Mansion, that's the voice. And so kind of the animation style and even the first sentence Jason says, or Ted says in Burger Barn is exactly what is said in, well, this is strange. That is exactly the beginning of Donald being pulled into Math Magic Land and having this conversation with the spirit of adventure. So that was another one where it was done over a long period of back and forth with artists and visual effects. There's a lot of fluid morphs in there because it was all at oneer and we were taking out some lines of dialogue. So I was finding head movements that match. But anyway, so he would, when we were doing the voiceover, it was Brendan just from the dailies that was so low because the timing was right and everything. So we were talking a lot about the voiceover and who was going to do it. And Jason was like, I wish, I know the original voiceover is, he's not with us any longer, he's passed away. But Disney has to have somebody that is this new voice. And And we were like, yeah, and it just kind of like left it in the room, and we went away for the weekend. And then I was just thinking like, oh, is anybody going to actually look for who that voice is? And so I took my kids to Universal, and I texted with another editor, great animation editor, John Venzen, and I said, hey, I'm doing this sequence for Ted Lasso. Keep it on the DL, but it's a vintage Disney cartoon, and we're looking for that kind of VO. He was like, well, if you're looking for something like this, and he sent me back a video. He's like, it's Corey Burton is the person you want, and I was like, okay, well, now he knows. He's kind of in the wheelhouse. He sent me a goofy video, and I was like, well, it's this one, but like, lips are sealed. And he was like, oh, then you definitely want Corey Burton. Corey Burton does, like, when the Haunted Mansion does the overlay for Nightmare Before Christmas, he does the voice to match the voice. So he is that person. And so he sent me a video of him talking at a conference about voiceovers and all that kind of thing. Just wonderful guy, and just seems so in the Ted Lasso, just like in the world. And so then I texted that to Jason, and I was like, this is the person. And he was so overjoyed that we found the person. He's like, do you think he'll do it? And I texted John, I was like, Jason's wondering if he'll do it. And John Venson goes, doesn't he know he's Jason Sudeikis? Which he goes, Jason responded with, that's very sweet, but we'll see. So we hit the ground running. The Monday we came in and found his info, and our post supervisor Robbie, reached out to his agent and Jason wrote a lovely email of explaining his love of the Disney cartoon. And because in this video that I sent Jason, Corey's talking about how he'll turn things down that he doesn't believe in, even if Disney asks. So Jason really wanted to sell his passion for it, and he does that a lot with things he wants, like whether it's clips we play in background or whatever, he'll reach out personally and tell them what it means to have in the show. Like there's always an intention to what we're putting in the show. So bottom line is we got Corey. Corey was so excited to come on and just really like elevated that sequence to another stratosphere once he came in with that voice. So it was, a really cool experience to really go that deep with that. And then the animation that came in and the hand that comes down, Jason was like, what if we add fingernails? It's the a female hand that comes down, and then the whoopsie that comes in is another, great voice that I won't reveal because it's a special, Sue says whoopsie, and credited the voice of God as herself. So, that's a fun Easter egg if people want to try to guess who that is.
I loved watching that sequence, Mel. I would come in and check in, and Mel would show me how it progressed, and it just got better and better and better. And I was like, this can go on the air now, but no, another 3 weeks of work made it better. It was great.
So we've touched a few times on the interest of fans in this show. And AJ, I think you mentioned Twitter. I would love to know if fan theories or any comments from fans have ever worked their way actually into this show where you said, that's not a bad idea, or maybe we do need to dial that down or that back up.
There was a fan suggestion playlist going around. Remember that, Mel? I don't know if we ever took anything off that. And it's possible. It's possible by coincidence. I just love how smart our fans are. They notice everything. Their theories have proved correct. They definitely nailed Roy's sister with the bushy eyebrows was way back in episode 208. And there's a couple other things that they've kind of sniffed out and gotten right. So it's always fun to see that. And I do love the discourse. I do read so many of the fan pages. I just got into a discussion with some fans the other day because they were like, in episode 9, when Beard does that, Ted says, hey, everybody, you just hear that? And Roy Kent said, great job. And Beard does that, and he faints backwards. Well, the people who cut the trailer did that from the front angle. And I'd chosen to do it from the side. We thought it was funnier that way. And I remember I was showing it to Jason. I'm like, should we switch over back to the front? Because that's how people saw that. And he's like, no, this is the way to do it. It feels right. So I was just sharing that with fans that, editing is about making choices. And, you can cut a scene with different angles, and we could both have the same footage and kind of come out with a different scene. So they loved that explanation. And then it turned into a whole thread. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to, but I love sharing they really are passionate about the show too. So, but yeah, there's definitely that pressure, when you're cutting, like, well, what take would Twitter want us to use here? We had 3 great choices. But yeah, you try to, I remember I would go into Mel and talk about it, and Mel's like, it's just poop, Mel would say, just let it flow. Don't listen to it. Just
I love our fans so much, but when we're in the midst of it, and this season kind of started to air more, I think when we still were in the midst of working on it, and I was like, we cannot let this derail us, like we are focused, we know what the story is, so I appreciate it. And I'll do a little bit and then I'll be like, this is too much. You know what I mean? Like, cause you'll see like, I'm like 40, this is amazing. This is amazing. And then somebody be like, this is not. And you're like, you take that to your soul. And I'm like, why is that the only thing I'm focusing on? So then it's like, you feel like I don't want to be Nate and just run to Twitter. But I'm excited for the fans, and we have this great fan group on Facebook, and they had done a poll before the season started of like, would you want movie night or pillow fight, which is something we said in 7. And I knew that at the end of 6, there was a pillow fight. And then when the trailer came out, they had some pillow fight things. And I was like, for that group of fans, I don't want them to know that that's coming. I want that to be a surprise. And Jason actually made that happen. He was like, we can't have any pillow fight in the trailer. So took that out. So like, that's the kind of things I think we thought about maybe fan wise, but and maybe a little bit for the fans, but it's definitely, it trickles, I think, maybe in our subconscious. But we kind of try to focus. It's like, it's game time. And for me, it's like, I feel like maybe it's my past competitive swimmerness coming out where it's like, focus tunnel, get the job done. And the fans will hopefully appreciate that more than us trying to appease everybody, because that's a dangerous place to be a little bit.
I like the thought of you two lurking undercover in the chat rooms of Ted Lasso, spitting out your own theories to see where they go.
We're planting things.
Yeah, exactly. We started the call off talking about, how does it feel now that the show has wrapped? We should definitely close out with just reflecting on, okay, now that you've been through this Ted Lasso journey, what is it you take away with you, as I'm prone to ask way too often?
Well, it's changed my life for sure. I've never had a job that was this long and to work 3 seasons. And I hope I get to work with Mel again and my assistants and our producers, and Jason and Bill Lawrence. And I just learned so much. I think I've grown as an editor. And Jason said that, Ted Lasso is not like Vegas. It's like what happens here, don't keep it here. Like take it with you to your next project. He said that to everyone, the cast, the crew. And so I think I've learned a lot of skills on this job that I want to use going forward as an editor. And again, it's just been life changing. I never dreamed that I'd be nominated for an Emmy, let alone win one. So it's beautiful. And I'm just so incredibly grateful.
Yep. Ditto. I hope I hope the team, it's very it doesn't happen often. And I kind of know this because I spent a long time on CSI. I spent 5 seasons there as an assistant. And I saw what a tight knit group of that was to have a show that kind of changed the landscape of television and how that coalesced them as a family. And I see a lot of that in us for Ted. And I'm so proud of that, I found, I kind of came into that late in the season, but I just thought it was so beautiful, and I still, my mentors, editors there, I still talk to, and we still hang out with each other's families. And so I see that with Ted a lot. So that's a beautiful thing, that we feel like a family, and we feel like, we've been through this really special thing together where we were working on something where we thought, is anybody ever going to watch this? And then, you get emails from people that say, this changed my life and this storyline touches me. And people reach out that you don't know. And old high school acquaintances reach out to me to tell me how much it means to them. I mean, it truly touches people. And you're just like, wow, I don't know if this will ever come again. So I would like to pinch myself a few times. So that's, I think what I'll take away from it is really trying to, appreciate the memories and the season was really hard, but somebody gave me the advice to drop in every once in a while and don't hover over the top, drop in. And I would tell that to my assistant, Frankie. I would say, I know this is really hard right now and expectations are high, but, take some time to look around, because this doesn't come very often of, the actors and the stories. And then the other thing is working with somebody like Jason and Bill, who want everyone to elevate, and it make you feel like you're better than you ever thought you could be. Or one of the things Jason said to me once that was so beautiful, to give to an editor, I think, and especially like a, female editor, say like, yeah, feel your power, like, embrace your power and feel your voice. And God, that's a gift, to not be afraid to share your thoughts and your opinions. A lot of times you're kind of, oh, I don't want to offend, or I don't want to say this and that. But it's like, if you say it in a TED way and share your thoughts and experiences, mostly that's always, and you're in a space like that with Jason, you and Bill, it's like, it feels welcomed. It's never unwanted. And they'll disagree. It's not that they take everything that you say, but it feels like a safe space to work in. So it's given me a template of what I know is possible. And that's wonderful.
Well, you both, along with your assistants, have a lot to be proud of. You believed, you elevated, you met those high expectations, you created and made this amazing show. And as a fan who I swear never said anything in social media, I was never in those chat rooms. I was always on your side. You made an amazing show, and I can't wait to see what you do next. And the only other thing I'll say is if Jason ever wants to move beyond the space bar and actually make an edit, you let him know. We're available here to help him here at Avid.
He would like that, I'm sure.
I think he would.
Yeah, he loves editing.
Yeah, he did. He would say it's the final rewrite. He really loved that process. He loves writing, I think, so much that he understood that we were, writing an editorial.
Absolutely.
All right, that Avid mouse pad's on the way. Jason Sudeikis, editor. That would be fun. But he's probably too busy with that acting and producing stuff to really crack the manual on Media Composer. Then again, he knows how that spacebar works. Not everyone does. Mel and AJ do, plus a whole bunch of other keystrokes too, I'm sure. But that is not what makes them great editors. It doesn't make anyone a great editor. Mel and AJ are great storytellers who understand performance and how to craft great moments from those performances. Cheers to the two of them on wrapping up a series that was loved by so many. 3 seasons doesn't seem like enough, and maybe in the end, it won't be. No matter what, please join me in thanking them for making some time for us today. As always, I really enjoyed talking to them. Do you know what I know that you would enjoy? Let me start that over. I know you'll like the latest features in Avid Media Composer. How do I know this? Because I really like them. And you and I, we have that thing. I just know you is all. But don't listen to me, yin to your yang. Go see for yourself. There is a link in the show notes that will take you to avid.com, right to the Media Composer page. How easy is that? That may be easy, but you know what's so hard? It's so hard to say goodbye. Goodbye to Ted Lasso, and certainly goodbye to you. But only for today. I promise we'll do this again. Until the next one, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.